Lamar Jackson sent a reminder to Josh Allen about who the MVP is.
Don't let the final score fool you. The Vikings took it to the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field, and I'm here to tell you how.
Easy breezy, you're back together again, and you eked out the W after a very tough day on offense.
What can the Knicks expect out of Karl Anthony-Towns?
The Washington Commanders have been finding different ways to win early this season.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
Lamar Jackson sent a reminder to Josh Allen about who the MVP is.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast.
I'm still fired up. I'm still fired up recording this in the early hours of Monday morning, and we have so much to talk about. The Ravens are back. They dismantled the Buffalo Bills by the final score of 35-10. Domination for 4 quarters. That's what everybody asked for. I know it got a little dicey at the beginning of the second half, but one of the worst play calls known to man was called by Buffalo, and the Ravens this time took advantage of it. So we're going to talk about Lamar Jackson because there was a lot of Lamar Jackson disrespect over the course of last week, and I would hope, I'm not very confident, but I would hope that the energy around Lamar this week is, a lot more respectful compared to last week. We're going to talk about Lamar and his game because I think people will look at the box score and the narratives are already coming out. Oh, Lamar did a good job handing off to Derrick Henry. We're going to talk about why, again, Lamar dominated in this game, and it's not because he turned the ball and handed it off. That is a ridiculous narrative. Then in the second part of the show, we will be talking about Derrick Henry and how he was able to get going, how the Bills just had no answer, and how it was almost kind of just not even an effort for Buffalo where they didn't have the personnel to match up with Derrick Henry and the domination we saw. Now the Ravens are utilizing him differently than the first couple of weeks. Then in the final part of the show, we'll talk about the defense because obviously Baltimore's offense did their thing, but that defense with a heck of an effort overall. So planning to talk about this team again, moves to 2-2 on the season. So start off at 0-2. I know 2 losses that maybe could have been avoided, but now 2 wins, 1 against Dallas and 1 against Buffalo. So Lamar Jackson reminded everybody who the MVP was. He reminded Josh Allen who the MVP was. And this isn't a shot at Josh Allen. Again, like I said it over the course of last week, I think Josh Allen is a really good quarterback, but it was the conversation around Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson where everybody wanted to give Josh his flowers, but Lamar got none. And we did comparisons and this, that, and the other. And Lamar went out there on Sunday Night Football in primetime under the lights and reminded everybody, including Josh Allen, why he is the MVP. And I mean, look, Buffalo came in as a dominant team. Josh Allen came in and he was beating teams up left and right. But to me, in my opinion, this was Buffalo's first true test, right? I mean, I think we can all be pretty honest about that. I don't think that's a hot take or anything. I mean, they beat the Cardinals, they beat the Dolphins, and they beat the Jaguars. I mean, the Ravens are much better than all 3 of those teams. And this is where I kind of say when the Ravens play good teams, it's always, the Ravens are playing this great team. Well, it also has to be, despite the Ravens' record, the other team is playing a good team too in the Baltimore Ravens. And Lamar on the day, we'll do a quick quarterback comparison here. I made this new graphic template. Very excited about it. Lamar Jackson, 13 for 18 through the air. So 72.2 completion percentage, 156 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. Josh Allen, 16 for 29. That's a 55.2 completion percentage, 180 passing yards and 0 touchdowns. So again, it's not like either of these 2 quarterbacks were popping off on the box score, but one had significantly more impact than the other, significantly more, and that is Lamar Jackson. And part of the reason for that is because of everything we've been talking about forever with Lamar Jackson. And again, this doesn't tell the whole story either with Lamar and Josh Allen, because on top of the passing, Lamar Jackson had 6 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown, which again, that's 9 yards per carry. Josh Allen, who is usually a big threat with his legs, only 5 for 21. That's 4.2. So when you talk about this team, when you talk about Lamar Jackson, it's about the eye test. This Ravens team is never going to make Lamar Jackson go out there and throw 45 times and try to rely on him to throw for 400 yards a game. That's not their MO. They're a run-first team that works the passing game off of that. And they're an unconventional team. Again, when Lamar was drafted, the Ravens moved in one direction and the rest of the league was moving in the other direction. But they trusted in Lamar and they trusted in what they believed in. And so 156 passing yards, again, is not this huge number. But Lamar Jackson can put on a Superman cape as many times as he wants to and beat teams. We've seen him do that over and over and over again. But what makes him so good is when he doesn't light up the box score and the Ravens still win by 30-plus points. And that is a product a little bit, right? I mean, more than a little bit, honestly, of who's around him. Derrick Henry was awesome in this game. Incredible. The defense stepped up in a big way. But Lamar Jackson provides so much gravity out there where for Derrick Henry, if Derrick Henry's gashing you, if Lamar Jackson is not there and you just put your average quarterback out there, well, you're going to pay the most attention to Derrick Henry because the average quarterback is not nearly as big of a threat. And so you're not focusing manpower over there. But with Lamar, you have to, or else you're going to get burned and he's going to make you pay for it 10 times out of 10. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So that to me, when the Ravens are able to do this and they're able to go out there and Lamar doesn't have this big, gaudy passing game stat box score or anything along those lines, and they're able to win by 30 points or win in a dominating fashion like this, yeah, it's not just Lamar Jackson, right? Derrick Henry had a great game. He was a huge part of this offense. He was the best player on the field in this game. I'm not disputing that whatsoever. But this was really the first time in a long time that Lamar didn't have to put on the Superman cape, didn't really have to do a ton in this game, but when he was asked to do stuff, he did it really well. Had the one fumble, which I know he's mad about. He talked about it post-game. We saw him visibly upset during the game as well. He knows he wants that one back. But MVPs, you can't just look at the box score. You can't just look at these things when it comes to great quarterbacks and, this guy, and I can already see the narrative. I'm, again, recording this before 6 a.m. on Monday morning. I can already see the narratives of Derrick Henry, saves Lamar Jackson, or Derrick Henry carries Lamar, whatever it is. Those false, untrue, and frankly ridiculous narratives. While Derrick Henry had the box score, and while Derrick Henry was the best player on the field on Sunday night, sit here and say, Lamar Jackson, all he did was hand the ball off to Derrick Henry. Nice handoffs. It's out of touch. And it's honestly pretty laughable because of the fact that he was still making good throws. He was finding open guys. He was working play action. He was picking up yards when needed. He had one mistake. And even with that, Baltimore still able to win big. That didn't deter them. He kept his foot on the gas. He did what he said he wanted to do, and the Ravens certainly did that. But this, again, it's not a shot at Josh Allen at all. But Lamar reminded the world who the MVP is. And in a way, this team could be 4-0. They're not. They are what the record says they are. But I was impressed with Lamar on Sunday night for multiple reasons. One being he was making the play when he needed to. Two being he wasn't trying to do too much all the time. Again, one play he was, and it bit him. But other than that, I thought he was fine. 3, some awesome throws, some awesome runs. And I'm not one to look at the box score and dictate, a guy had a bad game because he didn't throw for as many passing yards as the other guy. I mean, we can put it in this context too. Let's pull back up the quarterback graphic here. I mean, Josh Allen had, 24 more passing yards on 11 more attempts? Okay. Lamar played better than Josh Allen. Lamar played better than Josh Allen in this game. Part of it was the Buffalo defense couldn't stop Baltimore if they tried. Part of it was Baltimore's defense stopped Josh Allen at almost every opportunity they got. But you can only play who's in front of you. And Lamar Jackson played a Buffalo defense that was not equipped to stop him, was not equipped to stop Derrick Henry. And they were missing some guys. They had some injuries, but so did the Ravens. The Ravens came out on top, and that's the facts. It was a dominant win. The Ravens are back. They showed their back. And Lamar Jackson, who has played well, by the way, in these first 4 games of the year. I think the misconception around Lamar, again, is the fact that the Ravens had those 2 early losses. That, oh, well, Lamar can't be playing that well if the Ravens are 0-2 right now, right? That was never the case. It was never the case. And part of that narrative is because of the fact that he doesn't put up these gaudy passing numbers all the time, when in reality, you could see that Buffalo defense was terrified of him, was terrified of Derrick Henry. That's why you bring in a guy like Derrick Henry, because you can compliment Lamar, and also Lamar compliments Derrick Henry. And with those 2 guys, if you were watching that game with your eyes, you saw a Buffalo defense that couldn't decide who to defend. They had moments. Buffalo's defense certainly had moments. I'm not saying that they were awful for the entire game. But we talked about coming into the week that the Bills did not have the personnel to match up with the Ravens. The Bills were not going to adjust their game plan to match up with the Ravens. And that always spelled a recipe for disaster. So, Buffalo matches up well with a lot of teams. They don't match up well with Baltimore. And what good teams do in that situation is you make them pay. And the Ravens made him pay. Lamar made him pay. Derrick Henry made him pay. Everybody made him pay. And so I was impressed with what the Ravens did in week 4. But for Lamar Jackson, I'm riding with Lamar here in saying that, well, he was not perfect. He played a very good game. And everybody's talking about MVP. Well, the MVP showed the apparent front runner for MVP what the MVP actually looks like.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Don't let the final score fool you. The Vikings took it to the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field, and I'm here to tell you how.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the moment? What's like the moment of the game? The one that defines what this game was for me. The most, like, if you wanted to tell the story of the game in one moment, what would it be? And my answer to this one might surprise some of you, and you might disagree with it, which is totally fine. But for me, the moment of the game comes in the middle of the second quarter. The Vikings have turned over the Packers twice. They are they're in the red zone, and Sam Darnold throws a back shoulder ball that like phases through, I think it was Corey Ballantyne. No, it was Keyshawn Nixon. Justin Jefferson catches it, end zone, and I'll go with emphatic gritty in the end zone, looking at the fans to go up 28-0. To me, this is the moment. This is, as O'Connell called it in his locker room speech after the win, this is the avalanche. You feel the avalanche. You can feel the team starting to feel the avalanche and going, oh my God, we are absolutely belt to behind on somebody again. You You can feel them buying in and believing that they are the unstoppable force in this thing, and that it is on the other team to simply walk out with all their limbs intact. You can feel that. And that kind of thing has been present now for 4 weeks in a row. They've gotten off to these incredibly hot starts, gotten into these great positions, and the Packers are the only team that didn't pack it in and basically quit on it, right? I mean, the 49ers kind of vaguely tried to make a game of it, but really couldn't. The Texans totally imploded on themselves. The Packers went and made a game of it. This play comes on the heels of just an absolute thrashing. You have an opening drive, score, beautiful drive. Packers go down and miss a field goal. Vikings score on the way back. You're up 14-0. And then you get pick, score. Kamu Grugier-Hill picks one off. Jordan Love, I'm going to say, tests a window he probably shouldn't have tested. Kamu dives on it. In the collision of all of that, Christian Watson gets hurt. He's feared to have a high ankle sprain for your fantasy purposes. That could have been a lot worse. But a lot of times that like twisty one turns into more sprainy stuff rather than like full on ACL tear out for the season, like the really scary stuff. So high ankle sprain, I think that's relatively good news considering how bad that could have been. But so he leaves the game. Vikings take over on offense. They score again. And then another one, high ball. Maybe there's some tippage going on there, a little tip drill thing. Shaq Griffin comes down with it, almost pick sixes it. And it's after that play. I think there was like one, I think there was like a holding penalty or something. Yep, one holding penalty on the goal line. You have first and goal from the 14. And Sam Darnold hits that. Justin Jefferson won. At this moment, we are absolutely thrashing them in all phases of the game. And you can tell in a lot of different parts of this, like this is the kind of day Green Bay is having. Jordan Love does not look good to this point. He's thrown 2 picks so far. Neither of them were particularly good throws. A lot of his throws are worm burners. They're at the ankles. They're dying on him, as the broadcast said. Trent Green said something about how maybe it's because he's not stepping into it because of his knee, but he never steps into it. Like he's always a back foot thrower. It's just what he does, which isn't optimal, but it's like worked well enough for him like thus far that they just kind of let him do it. But yeah, that means you're going to have spotty accuracy. And especially if you don't quite trust your base, it maybe is exacerbating that problem. So you've got that going on. They missed a kick. They've got their pass rush isn't getting home at all in the first half. Oh my God. The O-line absolutely blasted that pass rush of Devontae Wyatt, who also would eventually leave the game. Rashawn Gary, all these guys totally blasted him. Long pockets all day, clean for Sam Darnold. And then at 28-0, the Packers are going to punt it back to the Vikings with I think a minute or so to go. And maybe they were going to have actually a chance to make it, 31-0, 35-0 if they wanted to go for it, or they could have easily just run the ball, gone into half, been really happy. Jalen Naylor loses the punt. He's in because of a rib injury that Brandon Powell sustained on a big hit earlier in the half. He would end up coming back to the game, but he's probably hurting pretty good. So Jalen Naylor is in, backup punt returner. I think he loses the ball in the sun. That's the way that Kevin Harlan sort of posited, because he was looking right into the sun. Loses the ball a little bit. It's way over his head, but he actually tries to back up and overhead it. Muff punt. Packers recover, first and goal on the 3, and they'll score a couple plays later with 14 seconds left in the half. So we go into halftime 28-7, and now they think they got something. Even with that, they will stop the Packers on the other side of halftime in their first drive coming out of the half. And the Vikings have a chance to put it away. They drive it all the way down to point blank range. And Sam Darnold on a 2nd down and 1, they're taking a shot to the end zone, right? It's a corner route to Aaron Jones. They really wanted to get Aaron Jones in the end zone because they wanted to have Aaron Jones Lambeau leap. If you're watching on YouTube, the thumbnail of this episode reveals that he eventually did, but he did it after the game. Just celebrating the win entirely, and you get this great picture. But this one doesn't quite get there. It is an ill-advised throw, and it's picked off by Xavier McKinney, who's been doing all these interceptions. He has 4 on the season already. Crazy stuff. Now, don't yell at me. Okay, I'm getting to it. The refs probably shouldn't have let this one stand. The officiating crew, it was a called on an interception on the field. Turnover is reviewed automatically, and it's very clear that he's bobbling it as he's going down. But for whatever reason, they let it stand. You're not going to get that call. My thing on this is a little bit like, man, but you like threw a really bad pick. Like that should have been caught. Just the fact that he kind of maybe bobbled it a little bit is his mistake, and he shouldn't have been rewarded with that. But at the same time, it's like, Sam, like for me, the more productive takeaway is, Sam, you can't throw that. And if he did bobble, we would be calling it probably a lucky break. That would have been the second dropped interception on the day. On the opening drive, Sam Darnold threw directly to a linebacker and he dropped it. So that would have been the second dropped pick of the day. And I feel a little bit like I don't feel too entitled to a second dropped pick. He probably just deserved that one. Even though it was the wrong call, and you can be as mad as you feel like about that. That could have put it away. It could have been 31-7 right there, maybe even 35-7. And, we would have been talking about maybe Jordan Love should have the baseball cap on because he's playing very clearly hobbled and not himself. That could have been the moment. Terrible play, and that's the kind of thing you just are going to have to put up with Sam Darnold. He's just going to do that. There's no world where we get into a game and go, I wonder if Sam Darnold won't do that. He's going to do that. It's what we bought into. And so far, it has been super, very absolutely worth it. Here's a stat for you. This came from, I think it was CBS Sports. There are 2 quarterbacks in NFL history who have started a game with 10 or more touchdowns in the first 4 games and won all those games. 2 people have done it. One is Patrick Mahomes, who did it in 2018, and then this year's Sam Darnold. Like, that's the level of elite quarterbacking that we're seeing right now. I do not feel shy using the E word here to describe Sam Darnold September. Now, the true elites do it week in and week out and let it go all season. We've got a lot of season in front of us, but September has been an elite quarterbacking season so far. Fact. Indisputable.
Easy breezy, you're back together again, and you eked out the W after a very tough day on offense.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
This defense played great, Matt. Came up when they needed them to. We'll talk about that later in the show. What does it mean for the injury situation with Rashee Rice? That's coming up in the next segment, and we start that it all comes down to this. It doesn't matter how ugly it is. It doesn't matter how, honestly, nail-biting it was or how confounding it is to see you do this to yourself yet again. But they found a way to get it done against an AFC West foe that I honestly didn't think was going to be able to put up much of a fight. In your opinion, Matt, was today's ball game more about the Chiefs not living up to expectations or the Chargers having a good plan and playing above the rim in terms of expectations for them?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was kind of a little bit of just 2 games in one. I mean, you had the first quarter, which Chargers just absolutely dominated. It had 101 yards in that first quarter. Obviously, the Chiefs came out extremely flat. They get the injury to Rice. There was nothing that went right for the Chiefs in that first quarter. 2 turnovers. I mean, an absolute, complete, and total dumpster fire. And then after that, I mean, the defense cranked it up. And really, the offense started cranking it up too, even though it wasn't maybe the production that you're used to from this team still. I mean, that's still going to be the challenge and question going forward. You started seeing the elements of it. And Mahomes even had a couple of throws in the second half that were vintage Mahomes. That it's like, how can this guy and the guy who threw the interception in the first quarter be the same guy in the same game? I mean, because one of them looked completely and totally like Patrick Mahomes and the other one didn't. So I thought it was really, those 2 games in one, because after the first quarter, the Chargers, whatever game plan that they had, got shut down. I mean, Chiefs put 17 points on them. Hey, not ideal, but you'd like to have more if you're the Chiefs. But considering just how awful the first quarter was, 17 points is a decent output. You knew it was going to be a fight, even with the Chargers and with their injuries. But to me, that 101 yards in the first quarter, 113 the rest of the game that the Chiefs defense gives up, those are the numbers that will play. If your defense continues to play like that, you're going to win a lot of football games.
There are so many things to talk about in this game. Defense played fantastic, and we will talk about that later. Justin Herbert came out throwing, and I still had questions on the first touchdown of the game, but it is what it is at this point. I couldn't believe he played in this game. He played well for the most part, although you could definitely see that his inability to run cost them at different times. There was a great example of that, I think, in the fourth quarter where Trey McDuffie just basically went right after the running back, knowing Herbert couldn't hand it off. It was an RPO, and you can't hand it off there. You can't have Herbert try to run it. So in that situation, it helps the defense. But you look at what Mahomes did. I mean, that interception in the first quarter was so costly, and it's more than just losing the possession of the ball. Obviously, we'll talk about Rice here in a little bit, but why you made that throw. And I'll admit, I didn't see the first 4 plays. TV was giving me a little bit of trouble, so I didn't see the first down to Travis Kelce for 38 yards. A little sad about that, but Carson Steele had a rough game, and it looks like Kareem Hunt's going to be the guy going forward.
Yeah, the thing that, really stood out to me, I think, a little bit about the Chargers game plan is that, once you got off the script of that offense, things fell apart in a hurry. They came out with a perfect game plan to kind of get around, Herbert's injury, to take, at least to minimize its impact, to get rid of the football quickly, a lot of misdirection. The opening script was fantastic. It's just once they got off the script, there was nothing there. There was a lot of miscommunications, a lot of mistakes. Once again, I mean, the Chiefs' run defense has just been absolutely spectacular. But there was a lot of miscommunications that the Chargers had. They had a lot of missed opportunities where they could have kept drives going, but you could tell that they weren't on the same page. I had one, play that probably should have called the timeout because they were so discombobulated, and Herbert just about got blown up on it. So that to me was a big part of it. I mean, the Chargers, they gave the Chiefs their best on that script, but once the script was out, Chargers had nothing left in the tank for the rest of the game.
20 carries for 50 yards. I just want to throw that out there really quick because you're talking about the running game and how good the defense did. That is phenomenal against this team who wants to run the ball.
Yeah, 2.3 yards a carry is not going to get it done for Jim Harbaugh. There's going to be a lot of evolution that has to go on there, whether it's forced or whether it's searched for. That's certainly the process, but that's not it. There were a number of things that still went well. You got, I think, a step up in play from Xavier Worthy. When Rice goes down, not only the deep ball is the deep ball. If you don't touch Xavier Worthy coming off the line, that's what you're going to get. So kudos to him for doing his job, showing his ball tracking skills like we've talked about in the past. That is something he is elite at. But I kind of chalk that up to a bad defensive play or at least scheme. For me, it was him getting down underneath, especially the last play, to really seal the game in a nice little drag across the formation to get himself in position to make that first down. That, to me, gives you a little ray of sunshine about the Rice injury that we'll talk about here in a minute. But, Matt, is that enough to go with the fact that Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes seem to figure each other back out? Is that enough to sustain us going forward here?
Hey, if the Chiefs are going to trust Xavier Worthy to run more sophisticated routes like that one on the final play to get the first down, yeah, I mean that's a big part. I mean, because I'm not saying that deep balls aren't hard; they are. But in order to respect Xavier Worthy's speed, teams have to be worried that he can run that route too, that he can do the short and intermediate stuff and cut it off, do those kinds of things. If he can, it's going to make the deep ball threat much more effective and much more productive. And the fact that he and Mahomes are already on the same page, clearly from the deep ball standpoint, is a good indication. And we can finally put to rest the narrative that, Travis Kelce is washed or retiring or, doesn't know what he's doing anymore. That one you can put to bed. Travis Kelce is as productive, alive, and well in Kansas City's offense. And yeah, I mean, there's going to be some good days and there's going to be some bad days, just the way it is for every player. And, maybe this is going to be the beginning of a streak. We've seen Travis go on these before, where he'll, put up a bunch of yards and a bunch of plays in a series of games in a row. So let's see what happens. But I mean, it's going to be, once again, I mean, the same problems that we're talking about in the first 3 games that were really led to some of the narratives about, Kelce and Mahomes and all these things. There's still signs of it there. The Chiefs are going to have to work on it. The protection has got to get better. Mahomes has got to be able to be more comfortable with the protection that he's getting. I think you saw some signs of that, at least in the second half. Kelce's got to be productive. Worthy's going to have to step up. All those things were true going into this game. They're still true coming out of this game.
One of the things that stands out to me looking at the Travis Kelce thing, and I got to give credit to Worthy. That was a fantastic deep route and a beautiful deep ball by Mahomes that we haven't seen forever. I think somebody tweeted out it is his longest air yard throw in his career. That was just a phenomenal deep shot by him. But one of the things that really stood out to me in the second half, if you go back and watch Travis Kelce, I believe it was a second down in the next to last series, or maybe the one before that, where Mahomes just basically throws it within, and there's probably 3 defenders around Travis. There's a linebacker coming across his face, and I think a DB right behind him, and Travis catches the ball. That shows you he still has the trust in him. That is a bigger play than is going to get credit for, and I don't think it ended up getting them. It obviously didn't get them a first down. I think that was a 2nd and 20 play. Got them at least in range to where they could maybe get a first down. But it's still huge to be able to have that kind of trust in your tight end and show it in this game.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What can the Knicks expect out of Karl Anthony-Towns?
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Karl Anthony-Towns for Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo trade, which just made for a lovely weekend, Ben. I don't know how was your Friday night?
It was a surprise Friday night. Yeah, I got home Friday night and was like, I had a couple texts like, "No way, what just happened?" And I, of course, I assumed it was Wolves related, but I didn't know what. And then there it was.
Yeah, thank goodness it was a benign thing, right?
I know.
Do you see this disaster?
Well, you assume like the weekend before media day and everything is like relatively safe, that nothing crazy is going to happen. But this was like it felt like the James Harden to OKC or from OKC to Houston trade like a decade ago, is that sort of timing almost.
Yeah. So once you got your bearings and saw the details of the trade, what was your reaction? Because I know I was like, I saw it. And I was getting ready to record another episode anyway. And then I was like, well, guess just scrap that. Because now I got to talk about this. And then initially I was like, I don't know if I want to say confused, but like definitely a little emotional. It was weird. Like Randle had been with this team a long time. So I knew that maybe the day would come when he would get traded. But when I saw that he was in it, I was like, oh, that kind of stings. And then seeing Dante in there too, I was like, that kind of stings too. He was going to be part of like the whole Nova group this year. That was going to be so fun. But then seeing Cat come back too, it's a guy that I went back before we recorded this. I listened to our episode that we did last year where there was like a rough rumor of potentially, the Knicks being interested in Cat. And, I was sort of like, I don't know if I love the fit because, I just the defense and the this and the that. And I was making all these reasons to not like it. So seeing his name pop up is like Cat's a Knick now. I was like, oh man, this is a guy I've not exactly been kind to in recent years that now is going to be playing for my favorite team, trying to potentially win a championship. So I think there was a decent amount of shock and awe on my end, but I don't know what it was like on your end.
Yeah, I mean, actually, a lot of the same stuff, right? Like, I mean, Karl Anthony-Towns rumors have been out there since like, I don't know, year 2 of his career, year 3 of his career. Basically, as soon as he won Rookie of the Year, it was, it felt like everybody wanted Karl Anthony-Towns to not be in Minnesota. And then we went through this period where he's, Cat said all the right stuff, right? He signed a couple extensions in Minnesota. He even said, like, it was at the end of the year, exit interviews this year. He was like, look, I want to retire here. Like, I want to win a championship here. Like, I love it here. This is where I've grown up, like all this stuff. And, that's all circulating again now because everybody's like, can't believe he's gone, like 9 years in Minnesota. Like, that very rarely happens. And he was there, he was the second best player in the Jimmy Butler team that went to the playoffs. He was the best player really in Ant's first year that they went to the playoffs. I would say Cat was the best player on that team. And then he completely reshaped himself and, from a basketball standpoint, to be the second option last year and to also take on a different role defensively. We can get more into that, but like Chris Finch talked a lot, the Timberwolves head coach, about how much Cat has sacrificed, somebody who had been a 2-time All-NBA player, a multiple-time All-Star, like to sacrifice the way he did last year and completely change how he played for the betterment of the team and for it to work. And then he turns around and gets traded basically on the eve of training camp is a really tough thing. And it's a tough sell to Wolves fans who, well, yes, I think anybody that's a fan of Cat or has watched Cat has a love-hate relationship with how he plays. And I'm sure we'll get into that too. The dude cares. He's a good dude. He's really good at basketball, and he's been in Minnesota for almost a decade. And so to see him traded at this point in the offseason, especially so unexpectedly, I think was the toughest thing. And then you got to unpeel, or peel all the layers of the onion in terms of what it means on the court. And, like there's a lot to get into there. I'm not convinced it makes the Wolves better. I've seen a lot of different takes out there. Like, does this help? Who does this help more? Like is it? It's so hard to know because there's a lot of, I mean, you already kind of briefly laid out the case, like Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo meant a lot to the Knicks. Cat meant a lot to the Wolves for a long time. It's just, I think it caught everybody by surprise, and that's made everybody kind of, be on their heels a little bit in terms of evaluating it.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know if I've ever seen a more divisive trade as far as like the immediate trade grades and everything. I feel like usually the grades kind of come in and, from the various pundits, and it's like A+ for the team that improved, that's trying to win a championship, and then A+ also for the other team because they got value back and they're going into a rebuild or whatever. But this is kind of the rare trade where both these teams have, I think, realistic, or at least somewhat realistic, finals aspirations this year. Like these two teams think that they could potentially win their respective conferences. Both came pretty darn close last year. I mean, the Knicks, barring all the injuries, looked like they could have probably made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. The Wolves did make it to the Western Conference Finals. And, I think there was a real case to be made that both teams, did it with, getting a year older, a year better, whatever, could have potentially, and the Knicks obviously making the Bridges trade and all that. Like they did stuff this offseason, I think, to try to get better. And the Timberwolves through the draft and everything else. Like there was a lot of moving parts that said both these teams just are trying to get better. And so it's bizarre to see this happen at this particular juncture. But if I could start getting into specific fit and whatever, I'm curious what your thought is on. So Cat and the T-Wolves found their most success the last couple of years in the somewhat risky experiment of putting Cat with Rudy Gobert, which I remember when I first heard about it, I was like, like that's going to work. Like, I was like, I don't think that's going to work at all. Like, why did they give up so much for Gobert to move Cat to the 4? Like, I thought he had a hard time keeping up with guys at the 5. Like, what makes them think this is going to work at the 4? And then it worked really good. And they were like one of the top defenses in the NBA. So I'm kind of curious. The number one thing that's coming to my mind when I'm thinking with my pessimistic side of my brain with this deal is, what do you think is going to happen if the Knicks are going to start Cat at the 5, which I think they're going to have to do for at least the first month or two of the season while they wait for Mitchell Robinson to come back. And then they can decide if they want to kind of make their own, like, Cat and Rudy Light sort of combo there with Mitchell Robinson instead of Rudy Gobert. But as of right now, I think he's going to have to start at center. Like, what's sort of your opinion on that? Considering I think that arrangement sort of came with mixed results with the Timberwolves when they trotted him out there as like the center.
Yeah, I think it really depends on who the opponent is, but if you go back and look at how the Wolves defended when Tibbs was running the team, their defense was actually, like, their offense was generally better than their defense under Tibbs. And a big part of that was the way they did deploy Cat. I mean, he they treated him like a rim protecting 5, and they played, they ended up playing quite a bit of drop coverage. I think early on they played more of Tibbs' old, ice coverage, and they kind of, tried a couple different things with him, but he was always the 5, right? Like he never played the 4. Tibbs was never, they acquired Taj Gibson, as of course the Knicks did as well, as of course every Tibbs team does. And Taj Gibson was playing the 4 next to Cat. They did try playing him with Gorgui Dieng, way back in the day. Gorgui Dieng played the 4 though, and Cat played the 5. And it never really worked defensively with Cat at the 5 previously. So that is a big question mark. I mean, what he did this last year for Minnesota is he played the 4. Rudy Gobert was protecting the rim, protecting the paint. They would allow Cat to be in a lot of the actions on the perimeter where possible. 2 or 3 years, actually pre-Rudy Gobert. So actually, this is probably what I would say is the most successful Cat's been pre-Rudy Gobert, was the first year under Chris Finch. And they played a really aggressive kind of blitzing scheme and pick and roll game almost all the time. Like they always had Cat at the level, and then would even show higher than that and really kind of trap the ball handler on the perimeter a lot. Like it wasn't just like we'll do this at the end of clock situations. Like it was all the time. That was the Wolves team that got the 6th seed and lost to Memphis in the first round before the Rudy Gobert trade. They had Jared Vanderbilt on the team. They had Patrick Beverly. They were kind of playing this frenetic, like just crazy, let's generate turnovers defense. And it actually worked pretty well because Cat's really mobile for a big, for somebody who plays the 5. And he mostly played the 5 that season. It worked really well. Last year, it was more dependent on matchups. Like in the playoffs, Karl Anthony-Towns was the primary defender against Kevin Durant last year and didn't shut him down, but there were a couple games he did, and Durant was not successful. The Wolves swept the Suns. And then he was the primary defender on Nikola Jokic in the second round, took 7 games, and the Wolves had the crazy comeback in game 7 to win. But that's because Cat is such a physical defender, and sometimes to a fault, it will get him into foul trouble. That's a big issue for him. It still is. But he can be a physical defender. He can also move his feet and stay in front of people. And so he's not going to protect the rim. He's never had a high block rate. But if it's a 5 that wants to get in the post and back him down, not that there's too many of those, he's going to be fine. If it's a 5 that wants to shoot the 3, Cat's pretty mobile. You don't want him backpedaling in drop coverage. You don't want him, switched on to too many quick guards. Like he's not going to, not that you want to do that with any bigs. So there's still some question as to like, because if Tibbs used him like he did, 6 years ago, I don't think that he's going to have a lot of success. But if he can be treated more as this versatile piece where we say, hey, here's your role. You're going to lock in and defend Joker. You're going to lock in and defend this guy. He can have success. And I think he always got a bad rap in terms of how bad he was defensively. It's just, he was never going to be a traditional rim protector. That was never going to be what he was defensively. So I think maybe we lost the plot a little bit on that early in his career. He was always kind of a okay to below average defender. He was never horrific. And then last year he was genuinely good. And that's one of my concerns for the Wolves, is losing Cat as a versatile defensive piece, because now you have Rudy protecting the rim. Julius Randle's not as good defensively overall as Cat. I don't know what that looks like.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Washington Commanders have been finding different ways to win early this season.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Washington Commanders 42, Arizona Cardinals 14. They come into the game 3.5-point underdogs. The home team, Arizona Cardinals, are expected to win. Not as much as the Cincinnati Bengals were expected to win, certainly. And the result goes about as opposite as I think the Arizona Cardinals, their fans, and everybody local to here would expect it to do or expect it to go. And I think that where I want to start with this conversation, as many offensive performances there were, another great performance by Jayden Daniels overall. Yes, he threw his first interception. We'll get to that here in just a little bit. But I want to hone in on the defense, because over the first 3 weeks of this season, the defense has been very porous. These players in the locker room, we talked to them, they'll admit it themselves to say that the secondary hasn't been all that good. Talked to Mike Sainer still after the game in the locker room, and he flat out said to me, so, these first 3 games, the secondary specifically, we haven't been up to the task. We haven't been doing what we need to do. And I'm paraphrasing here. But he said that tonight they felt like they were much better, much more organized, and much more effective. Now, we heard from Joe Witt Jr. earlier this season saying they're still looking for that perfect cornerback combination for their team to determine who's going to be the regulars moving down the field or moving down the schedule. And I thought it was really interesting. Started the game with Percy Butler and Mike Sainer still as your outside corners. Benjamin St-Juste was actually in the slot. Now, that was kind of an anomaly, but basically your top 3 corners, Benjamin St-Juste, Percy Butler, a cornerback playing as a cornerback, did play as a safety as well, but Mike Sainer still on the outside. I asked Mike after the game how he felt about playing outside as much, so he loves it. So he loves competing, loves going out there. Feels like he's getting really strong out there and certainly getting his feet under him. And it was great to see this defense just as a whole step up. So you talk about the secondary. We also got to talk about that pass rush, right? And that's the other part that Mike and I talked about too is, early on, the secondary is not communicating well, but also the pass rush isn't getting home, because sometimes a pass rush getting home can hide some secondary deficiencies, whether it's a play-to-play or whether it's a personnel issue. And tonight, the Washington Commanders secondary or pass rush certainly getting home on quarterback Kyler Murray. Dorrance Armstrong, we've been talking about this week, guys. Dorrance Armstrong, I told you, if Joe Witt Jr. was being completely transparent and honest, he'd probably say Dorrance Armstrong was the most disappointing part of the first 3 games this season, because they really thought he was going to come in here and take some of the stuff he was able to do in Dallas with limited reps and really expand on that as a full-time guy here with the Washington Commanders. Hadn't been able to do that so far, but he comes up with 1.5 sacks. I'll tell you right now, some of us in the press box thought he should have got credit for 2 full sacks, but he comes away, at least as of right now, the NFL does have a way of adjusting these things, but as of right now, credited with 1.5 sacks. Jonathan Allen, defensive tackle, came up with a full sack. Bobby Wagner had half a sack. Frankie Louvu had half a sack. Deron Payne had half a sack. And then, of course, Frankie Louvu also coming up with a critical forced fumble and fumble recovery all on the same play. The play originally was ruled that the receiver was down by contact. You could tell by the body language of the receiver that he knew he was not down by contact and that thing was going to get overturned, and it certainly did. So Frankie Louvu coming up with a forced fumble and the fumble recovery on that one. Big clutch game by him. And overall, guys, Kyler Murray, 16 for 22, 142 yards, 1 touchdown, does come away with a 104.7 quarterback rating or passer rating. But you don't look at this game and say Kyler Murray had a 100-plus passer rating type of game. On the ground, only 1 carry, 3 yards. That was his long, obviously only had the 1 carry. And then, gets sacked 4 times. So that is the epitome of understanding your team, your rival team's strength in a competition, coming out with the game plan to stop it, going out there, executing, and getting the job done. And that is what the Washington Commanders did on Sunday afternoon. So to come away with this 42-14 win. On the other side of the ball, the good guy side of the ball, Brian Robinson Jr., 21 carries, 101 yards, 4.8 yards per carry, 1 touchdown, 18 yards his long. Jeremy McNichols, 8 carries, 68 yards, 2 touchdowns along of 27. Talk about a guy stepping up. They talked all week about how you don't replace Austin Eckler, who had to miss this game with his concussion diagnosis, but you just kind of step up and hope that you can do something. Well, Jeremy McNichols certainly came in, looked the part, and to Jeremy himself, it's not going to be a surprise, right? He's a guy that we talked to during training camp in the preseason. He was on the program here, and he's always had confidence. I remember him going back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when he was drafted into this league, and he's kind of gone through some things. Well, going through some things and bouncing around the league a little bit also allows you to grow, allows you to mature. So when you have these opportunities as a third running back to become the second running back, and you're on a team where you're going to get burned, like Brian Robinson's not going to get 30 carries. That's insane. So if you're Jeremy McNichols coming into this game, you're going to get opportunities. He took full advantage of those opportunities. Again, 8.5 yards per carry on the night here in Arizona, 68 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then Jayden Daniels contributing to the running attack, contributing to the Washington Commanders' ground dominance here in Arizona, 8 carries, 47 yards, and a touchdown for him. look, if you listen to me preseason, I told you to draft Brian Robinson. I told you to draft Jayden Daniels. I got both of them on my team, and I'm sitting pretty in my money league and my game day media league as well, because Jayden Daniels not only doing some good things on the ground, but also doing some good things through the air. Four incompletions tonight. So doubling his incompletions from a week ago. Ben Standing kind of jokingly asking Dan Quinn about, what do you do when your quarterback doubles his incompletions? Obviously, not too big of a deal. 233 yards, a touchdown. Does throw his first interception of his NFL career. In real time, we were sitting in the press box watching that play. I felt like the ball was high behind Terry McLaurin. But give a lot of credit to Arizona Cardinals cornerback Garrett Williams, I believe is his name. Sorry if I messed that up, Cardinals fans. But Garrett Williams, I believe, is the DB who comes up with the interception. Had to make an incredibly athletic, coordinated, kind of batted the ball, then caught it on the way down to the ground, secured the catch to come up with the interception. And look, if those are the kinds of interceptions that Jayden Daniels is going to throw, where they're competitive, they're deep downfield. I think he gave the Cardinals the ball here in their own end. I want to say the 19-yard line. Don't quote me on that, but it certainly was in this end of the field. So it's not like it put them in scoring position automatically. And the DB had to make a pretty impressive catch in order to come up with it in the first place. So those are going to be the types of interceptions Jayden Daniels is going to throw in his NFL career. I think we're going to be all right with that. Jayden asked about it after the game. So then maybe he was just being a little greedy, right? Just kind of going up there for it. Terry McLaurin was certainly in double coverage. Budda Baker was also on the right side of him over top. And so even if he leads them, he's probably at least going to get Terry leveled pretty hard by a hit by Budda Baker. So good to see at least guys come away clean from it. The defense gets a 3 and out. Commanders get the ball right back. Complimentary football happening with the Washington Commanders here on the surface of State Farm Stadium.
Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Everything was awesome. Jimmy, that game yesterday, I felt like Stefan from SNL, like just starting out, with like, this game's got everything. It's got juggling midgets and 3 offensive pass interferences by one team that I've never seen happen before. It's got comebacks and blowouts and close games. It's got everything. That was one of the most amazing games I've ever been to in my life. And if you had told, it would have been one of the most amazing games if it had just stopped at 28-0 Alabama, because that's amazing in its own right. This game had a safety, 3 offensive pass interferences. It had a freshman, a 17-year-old who was the best player on the field, full of NFL dudes. It had 2 quarterbacks throwing the ball like nobody's business. I mean, it was unbelievable. It was the most surreal, incredible game I think I've ever been to. And I've got so much to say, but I'm going to let you go for a minute.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to even pick out a place to start, but I really think there's 4. I mean, I think the right word for me would be epic. There's 4 different, but it was like an epic movie with 4 parts. I mean, the first part was an epic start for Alabama. I think when Alabama raced out to the 28-0 lead that became 30-7. That was about as good as this Alabama team is going to play. I mean, that was the best team in college football. They were fantastic, and it was just an epic historical start, and as good as this team could play. Awesome. Then give Georgia a ton of credit. An epic comeback. They could have so easily packed it in and said it was not our night. We just got to regroup and replan against Alabama. No, down 30-7, Carson Beck went to work. Carson Beck proved, I think, his NFL value last night. I thought he in particular was fantastic in the comeback. And I would just say that comeback was epic. I mean, that was how they got off the mat like that to take the lead. Just unreal. Then the last two epics. The epic play by Ryan Williams that won the game for Alabama. I mean, it literally won the game for Alabama. And, mentioning that he's 17 is now beyond. It was fun and it was funny. And then it got over said. And now it's just forget how old he is. It doesn't matter. I mean, the kid could win the Biletnikoff at 17 as the best wide receiver in college football. I think that's reasonable. And Jim Nagy, how about this tweet last night from the Senior Bowl's Jim Nagy? If Ryan is 3 and done and goes to the NFL and plays in the Senior Bowl, he would do so as a 19-year-old because the Senior Bowl is played in January and his birthday's in February. Played in the Senior Bowl at 19.
They'd be like, "You got high school Senior Bowl?" No.
Yeah. So that was the third epic. It was an epic all-time play. That we will see the replay of that Ryan Williams touchdown 200 more times just this year alone, and that's probably not 200 enough times. That play won the game for Alabama, and then of course the final epic, the epic play by Xavier Brown in the end zone to win the game. If Georgia had scored there, it would have gone to overtime, and who knows what would have happened, but it didn't because Xavier Brown, the freshman, made a play. They picked on him all night. I think there were 8 individual targeted plays at Xavier. He did give up a touchdown, but like all freshmen, he hung in there. I'll say all freshmen. He hung in there. He got better.
Like good freshmen.
Yeah, like good. And he made the play at the end, and it was an NFL type play too. Xavier Brown, he's so outstanding. It's just impossible not to be in the shadow of Ryan as far as that freshman class. But we would be, if it wasn't for Ryan, we'd be talking about Xavier. This would be the Xavier Brown podcast about how good that kid is as a 18-year-old freshman. So again, 4 epics. Alabama's epic start, Georgia's epic comeback, the epic play by Ryan Williams to give Alabama the lead, and then Xavier Brown clinches it with just a fantastic cornerback play in the end zone.
I've never been prouder to be the host of the Ryan Williams podcast. I'll tell you that. And last night it was kind of funny. I don't know if any of y'all follow Jimmy and me on Twitter. You should, because we can be fun occasionally. Well, last night I guess I was fun because I may have partaken in some adult beverages, and when I'm in a good mood and I've been drinking like that, which isn't often for me to drink like that. I get like. Remember when the Houston Astros were going to create a series with the New York Yankees and Seinfeld, and the 3 Houston guys came up and all they kept saying was that, you tell that Bastich, I'm going to try and clean it up. You tell that Bastich and, that's some bleep, stuff like that. And they were doing it in a friendly way, the way Southerners do. Like, oh, I love that son of a beep, Yeah. And that's what I was doing all last night. I was like, what's up, you son of a beep? And I kept like, high-fiving people, and somebody finally introduced me to another guy who was just like watching me and sort of giggling, and I high-fived him and said, "Roll down, you Bastich, and you son of a beat." And I put my arm around him, and my friend goes, "Luke, that's a federal judge." I said, "Well, hurry up and take my picture so I can blackmail him later." I mean, I was giddy as a schoolgirl. It was bananas. The whole game was a blast. And look, I'm glad you said that, because we're going to wax poetic about this game from Alabama's perspective for a long time.
That episode of Seinfeld has to be like the real Astros fans' least favorite episode of all time. They're probably like, we're from Houston, Texas, the 4th largest city in the U.S. We're not from Hazard County, Kentucky.
Yeah, probably. But it is also a true representation of Southerners. I don't know about Houstonians. But, I'm glad you brought up what you did about Georgia, because I do want to say this. I'm not trying to be like gracious winner, wink, wink. I want to say this like for real. Man, I appreciate Georgia's comeback. I don't like that they did it. I wish we had blown them out. But man, if you're a college football fan, and now, Jimmy, I think you and I watch even more college football than we ever have probably. And I think we understand how hard it is to do what they did against this team in that environment. Kudos to Bryant-Denny Stadium and everybody who showed up and everybody who was out there. Look, I hated y'all when we were leaving because, see, also some other people in my group, another friend and my wife especially, we had all been partaking in the partying, and she has to hug everybody when we leave. Another Southern thing. And I'm like, get out of here.
100,000.
And I'm like, let's get out of here. And so she's hugging people like she's some kind of out of town childless aunt that she has all these friends, and she's like, oh, I just love you. And I'm like, get in the car and let's go. And finally we did, and it all worked out. But man, I saw a bunch of people last night like, man, y'all got to do a podcast tonight. And I was like, if I can get back to Birmingham in time, and I didn't get back till way late, and then you were already asleep, and I stayed up and watched some of the game again because I was like, man, I am not going to appreciate this game the way I should. Last night, I was like, I'm just not going to. But I do appreciate Georgia's comeback. That was really, really hard to do. I want Georgia fans to know, dude, that was pretty cool. Now, I know some things suck for y'all. Like we've won 8 of the last 9 and all that stuff. That stuff does suck for y'all. But to get off the mat and do that against us last night, I can't do anything but applaud you. I mean,
it's like Alabama had a 28-0 lead, but I don't really want to play them again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No,
compliment. I mean, I'd prefer not to play Georgia again, but hey, you might have to. You might see them in Atlanta. You might see them in the playoff. Those are 2 of the best teams in college football, and just a knockdown, drag out. And again, Georgia's comeback is what made it a classic. And like Luke said, I mean, I just really respect what they did. I think for college kids, that's really hard. I mean, I think the tendency for players that age is to get frustrated. Angry.
Say it's not our night.
Yeah, say it's not our night, and it's done. Wave the white flag. You see fans do that all the time. How many fans do you see on message boards quit in the first quarter, or ahead or behind? You got to play for 60 minutes. And Georgia did that, and so it was a classic because of the grit that Georgia showed while behind. But hey, this is Locked On Bama, and man, last night was a solidification or a validation. There's a better word, a validation of the transition and how smooth the transition has been. Not that, hey, Kalen DeBoer's the guy. Let's give him a 25-year contract. He's the next king. It's not that. That's an over. Let's play a season of football at least before we decide what the rest of his career is going to look like. But it was a validation of how seamless the transition was, not just from the greatest coach of all time to Kalen, but how the players with the schemes. I mean, Alabama is ready to beat Georgia in game 4, having a brand new offense, a brand new defense, freshmen everywhere, Kalen DeBoer on the sidelines, Nick in the press box, and only in game 4, Alabama's ready to beat Georgia, which means they can beat anybody in college football.